Yeah, big shout out to Justin and Michael for
Yes,
putting.
Dan.
I can personally attest here for the uninitiated. I'm Jordan French with Grit Daily and Block Telegraph. I personally attest to the awesome job, bang up job that these guys do in person. I was there to Dcentral in Miami. I'm really looking forward to what we bring to the table in Austin in June, precede CoinDesk Consensus. So definitely check out Consensus for that. And then real quick, before I get Mario and Miko, we're going to have an awesome talk. Big shout out to all you in the audience. I see Jay, Time, Austin, Guillermo joining us, Maxim, Danny, hi Daniel, Taliz, Esther. I know you're here for. I know we got a lot of Miko fans and Mario fans in the crowd. So we'll get right to it. I know that some of you also are joining us from around the world. Speaking from around the world, Mario just told me right before he hopped on a plane himself, which begs the question, let's just start teleporting you around the metaverse. Mario, you are in Dubai.
Yeah, man, I landed from Australia. Like, I'm jet lagged as hell right now. But I landed in Australia in the morning. 2 hours later, I was at a panel, and then a few more panels after that, and here I am still alive.
So all I heard was Miko and I are just going to pepper you with lots of questions.
Yeah. Miko's in the mood, man.
Yeah,
The sun is.
I'm here in San Francisco with at GDC, the Game Developer Conference. So, definitely working it.
Double tapping, as they say, both of you, myself too. We just got hot off the heels of South by Southwest. So, like I said, I'll be back in Austin when Decentral's there. I think 7th, 8th of June precedes CoinDesk. I know they have official side event. But yeah, just to jump right into it, because inquiring minds do want to know, Mario, Miko, and Mario, I'm going to go. I said I was going to pick on you, so I'm not letting you off the hook for sure. Investing in this space, a lot of the folks who are joining us are investing in the space, not just financially, but also their time. But to frame that, like there are a lot of promises that have started to come out vaguely. We get a lot of emails in on this and what to expect from the metaverse, how to engage with it. And one of those expectations is a sort of, utopia to describe it, Mario. And that's potentially something that we could dispel. Your take, Mario.
Yeah, so I said that in a panel earlier today, because I was listening to a podcast on the plane, and it was talking about how, so like your question is timed perfectly. Earlier today, I was listening to it, and someone's talking to how Web3 is going to change the world in so many ways, bring equality to the world, etc. Which I think many parts of that are true, and we're seeing that with obviously Axie and the opportunities that's brought around. But I think similar to what happened with the Web 2.0, it's still run by humans. The imperfections that that we are born with will still be there with any new technology that arises. However, it is an improvement, but it will be far from a utopia. I'm not saying it's going to be worse or better. Our world's going to improve or get worse. I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend to know. But I will say that Web 2 brought, instead of bringing more decentralization, it actually brought more centralization, arguably, with obviously Meta, Google, etc. So we'll see what Web 3 will bring. It does allow for the decentralized transfer of value. That does open up massive opportunities, especially for people, I've never been on panels with so many different cultures when I'm different virtual panels. We have a guild at one of my companies. It's called Goat Guild, and we've got members from all around the world. So I see the opportunities it will bring, but I also want everyone to be cautious and pay attention to how the space evolves. I'd be curious to see how it evolves. I'm just not optimistic, not pessimistic. I'm just watching very objectively.
Obviously, super early innings, but it sounds like you're firing a warning shot. People do not expect too much. I know some of our expectations have been lowered over the last year or two. We also saw some analogies, right, with virtual reality over the last decade in particular, where there are a lot of promises, not much bore to fruition. Miko, I want to go to you. Gumi Crypto's Capital. I know you're an early investor in some of the other folks that we work with. But on the same question, and just to frame this, Miko, specifically, where should we set our expectations in regard to what we can expect from the metaverse and how it'll affect our everyday lives? Miko?
Yeah, so I think for me, one of the things that so we were seed stage in YGG, the Yield Guild, seed stage into OpenSea, like a number of kind of these metaversal and NFT based projects. And for us, like what we see now is that the world is ready for experimentation. So it feels like the metaverse is almost the ultimate experimental playground in that people are experimenting with the fabric of reality itself, right? So, in a sense, I think what Mario's alluding to is that we still remain embodied, right? So, we ultimately, it folds all the way back to things like the wrench attack, habeas corpus, which is that, that we're still embodied, and the metaverse is really something where you have spatial embodiment, in a cyberspace, right? So, where are you when you're making an email? Right? You're in a place called cyberspace, right? But cyberspace doesn't have presence. So you're not there, right? Your just thoughts go there, right? So, to me, the question that I think is interesting about experimental reality is that today is the age of experimentation, right? So we're experimenting. We have experimental money. We have DAOs, are experimental governments. Avatars are experimental personalities. Metaverses are experimental realities, right? And why is this happening? So I'm going to put it to you kind of straight, right? Which is, I feel like, the world is, it's like a crack addict. It's hit rock bottom, or another way of looking at it is it's like a big boat in the middle of the ocean that's sinking, right? And the way you look at all the little boats going in every direction is every single little boat is an experiment, right? So in a sense, like the hypothesis of every little boat is maybe there's land in this direction, right? So everybody's going in every direction, and I think as Mario was indicating, not all these directions are fruitful, and half the boats contain pirates, right? So it's there's more of a tone of desperation than there is a tone of optimism. But on the plus side, like we do need exponential technologies and solutions. So the willingness to invest and go into these experimental solutions is just a function of what we know for sure is the stuff we're counting on right now isn't working.
A lot of metaphors, Miko, and don't worry, we'll unpack each one of them. I want to go to Mario on this though specifically. You said it was early, Mario. We established that foundation, but are there any winners that you can pick already from the various guilds that people join, or particular metaverses that do seem to be fragmented, like Miko established?
Okay, so how do we define what a winning metaverse is, what a winning guild is, what a winning business is? And the way I would look at it is obviously a very simplistic way of looking at it, but a good indicator is the community, the adoption that it has. Actually, it's not the best game, but it's got the most users, the biggest name in the space. Now, while that gives it value and could be a winner down the track because of that, it's more likely to be one of the winners. Stickiness has never been there in games. Games could skyrocket and they could collapse just as fast. So, I keep in mind that the human brain overestimates the short-term impact of innovation, yet underestimates the long-term potential. And by keeping that in mind, I try to look for projects that are starting with the basics. Now, I remember back in 2017, 2018, decentralized everything, decentralized Uber, decentralized Airbnb, decentralized Deliveroo. Obviously talking about those projects when the protocols were not ready just didn't make sense. So I'm looking at the same thing now. Everyone's meta everything. Everything's moving to the metaverse. Everyone's following the hype. And that kind of, I think the foundation is not there. I think we need to see the evolution of different games, the evolution of a metaverse, what makes a metaverse, how will it function, how similar or different will it be to the physical world, what is the real utility of land, do we really need land, how do we give land utility? There's so many, how will game mechanics work, how will interoperability work? There's just so many foundational things, and I try to look at, we talked about investment opportunities earlier before we started, and I try to look at the foundational requirements for this to exist down the track and how that will look in the next 5 years' time. And I try to break it down as well, maybe starting to look how that will look in 20 years' time, the world that I see, thinking Ready Player One type world. And then trying to break it down a few steps. What's missing from there? What's missing from there? And just go back to the foundational part and then find opportunities that way, while again remembering the brain overestimates short-term, underestimates long term.
Sure, and just to repeat that back to you on the question, Mario. It is too early for you to pick particular winners. What you established is that there are a lot more sort of foundational, elemental pieces that still need to be figured out to really decipher who's going to be a clear winner or not. Did we get that right, Mario?
Yeah, and then cautiously not chasing hype, and focusing what is going to get adoption, what is really needed right now, rather than what sounds really sexy, meta this, meta that.
Okay, and that helps us start to develop a framework then that you seem to have in mind, at least from investment standpoint. I'm going to go to Miko on this, so just to develop that main thread, and I'm going to pin something that you mentioned earlier on the board, and that was habeas corpus. Miko, just to get everyone up to speed for the uninitiated on that term, it's a legal doctrine. It's like has the body, right? Right, where a pursuant or plaintiff can pursue remedies, right, or relief against another subject by taking something from them
That's right.
physical, right? And so, I think the first natural question to ask is, how does that relate to the metaverse, where things aren't, at least at
Yeah,
first
yeah,
glance?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, so the first thing I wanted to do, so I was hanging out with Jiho, Xe founder, last night, at a party, and one of the things I'd like to do is kind of not count them out. So, I think that, to me, one of the things that I think is super important is, and add to the framework that Mario put in place, is really the idea that the winners are actually playing games that have winners. Right. And so, one of the things that's so interesting is, I agree with you that the idea of a game, let's make a game, is it's a flash in the pan because it's entertainment. Right. Entertainment's like, hey, look at me, I'm entertaining. Right. And then the attention goes away. Right. Someone goes to the next game. Right. So, but the thing that's interesting about, without dropping too much of his alpha, they're building infrastructure, right? Obviously, Ronin, and they're also building additional infrastructure. They're also building a transmedia franchise, right? So if you think about durable transmedia franchises, the world's biggest one is Pokemon. The one under that people don't know is Hello Kitty, right? And then below that, there's some other ones: Mickey, Winnie the Pooh, Mario. So there's a lot of that. But what I wanted to kind of reflect on is, I wanted to reflect on that games that will have winners that people are playing well. OpenSea is playing a game really well, which is, the market wants there to be a one-stop shop for NFTs. I think they're playing it well, right? So if you're playing a game that has a winner, right, then you can be the winner, right? If you're playing a game that doesn't have a winner, you can't be the winner of that game by definition. So you got to find people that are playing the game that has a winner. I think YGG is playing a game that has a winner, and I think they're playing it really well. So I'm going to call those as, prospective potential winners. So coming back to your original question about produce the body, habeas corpus, right, is that we remain physically embodied, right? And the way I want to characterize this, that's so important right now, is that currently there's a war, right? And what we saw is, we saw like Nord Stream pipeline. We almost saw the Germans flip to the Russians because of the pipeline, right? So we're still bound with energy. If you see the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia, right, it's based on the petrodollar, right? So the dollar is basically backed by energy. Bitcoin's backed by energy. It's backed by electricity, right? So when we think about this, that's like the body of the earth, and it's the human body, right? Because it has to do with connected to nature, right? So we're connected to nature. Even if we go to a fantasy metaverse, we're still sitting in a room embodied, right? And so my point is, when I talk about something like a wrench attack, I'm really talking about an attack at the fundamental layer of infrastructure, which is where, we're in a physical form, right? And, being in a physical form subjects us to entropy, lack of energy, friction, everything's falling apart, So to me, like, these kind of foundational concerns and constraints are not liberated because we're connected to a computer metaverse, right? Because we just think we're free, but in fact, we may not be free, right? That's the matrix.
Good foundational point. Makes a lot of sense, in the sense that the vulnerabilities that were always there in Web 1, Web 2 are still there. For Web 3. That does beg the question, because this is in part about investing. That if there is an opportunity to go upstream, right, of all of this, to security, for example, to patching some of those vulnerabilities, if perhaps that's where there isn't attention, but that because there isn't attention there, that is where the alpha Is Mario? I'm going to go to you with this on that question, and then to Miko.
Yeah, so there's many areas that don't have the attention that are being ignored. And I think, if you look at Dcentral back in 2017, 2018, when I first looked at the project, I don't know, Miko, whether you invested. If you did, I applaud you, because I'm stupid enough to just ignore it. So there was no attention there. And I try to avoid the hype, but it's not easy at all. When you see so much money flowing, like I remember the last few months just been stupid. It's just been stupid. Like seeing the projects go, all these different VC groups, and you see those different projects pop up, and they just many of them rebranded. Reminds me back in 2017 when some tea company added blockchain there or something. Was it a tea company? Do you remember? It was a public company, and they changed the name. They added blockchain, and that boosted their valuation.
Yeah,
And everyone was
blockchain.
Yeah, the Long Island tea.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's it.
Long Island. 100 years, suddenly there are multiple, stratospheres because of that.
Yeah, and then I'm just saying the same thing again. There's genuinely projects, and I'm not going to name them because they could do well, and that could be the stupid one here. But they changed their name to add Meta in there. Now I know I keep just pushing that point, just because I don't know if others ignore it intentionally, or they just don't mind because everything's pumping, or at least was. So I think it's a good. Jordan, you mentioned that. I think Miko or Jordan, you mentioned about looking at those. Oh yeah, well, Jordan, security is one example. Looking at those spaces that don't sound sexy, but just make sense and allow for the sexy things to operate in 5-10 years time. It's a wiser choice. I don't think I need to explain why.
And Miko, is that it seems that Mario also will deposit that security, some of the foundational layer, right, that you highlighted, we're still vulnerable in Web3, just like they were in Web2 and Web1. Because
let me
isn't there.
Yeah, let me bring it to you a certain way, right? Which is that what we know for a fact is that Zuck doesn't want to run a company called Facebook. He wants to run one called Meta, right? And like Jack Dorsey doesn't want to run a company called Twitter. He wants to run a company called Block, right? So like everybody knows that Web 2 is broken, right? And beyond Web 2, obviously banks are broken, governments are broken, right? So a lot of the institutions are broken, right? If you look at the incentives, the incentives are broken, the security's broken. Oh, you want a blue check mark in Twitter, just go buy an account. If Twitter adds 300,000 bot accounts, then they can go to Wall Street and say, look at how many users we have now, right? So it's really messed up, right? And so the thing that we do know for a fact with Web3, so Web3, I don't like the name Web3, but what I do know is Web2 is broken, and I know what they're missing is they're missing cybersecurity and cryptography, they're missing privacy, and they're also missing incentives. And guess what? Blockchain technology happens to have all three of those things, right? So like it's very logical, right? It's logical that we're going to go fix that stuff, and it's going to be, obviously Mario's saying, yeah, it's not going to be a utopia. It will be incrementally better, right? And I talk about what I call the arc of history, which is cribbing from Dr. King. So I do believe that it does bend in the proper direction. When I do look back at like the mid 90s when I got started here in Silicon Valley, like we were just deliriously excited about the internet. We absolutely thought it was going to be utopia, and look at where we are now, right? So in a sense, like I'm sympathetic to that position.
Yeah, certainly. You referenced a bend though, and so I'm going to take an example that you used earlier, and then define and identify exactly where there might be a gap. One example you articulated was a blue check mark at Twitter. Well, you also heralded, the sort of winningness of OpenSea, which I think at this juncture is not disputable. Clearly, that's a winner take most market, and they're dominating that, Miko. But nonetheless, there's still a verification system at OpenSea. There's still that sort of check mark. And then from my pedestrian standpoint of view, right, as a journalist, it looks like the processes are awfully similar, which opens the door to corruption, which is another way of stating what we all witness on Twitter. I'll just say it out loud. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, it is possible to some degree to float some currency and get that, at least in recent history. I don't know exactly the case now, right? But that is a form of corruption. What does OpenSea do that's different, just as a categorical difference, right, for Web3 that maybe the sort of Facebook, Instagram duopoly and Twitter, as you just pointed out, could not do? Because right now that does look like it's pretty similar, and that is an important security feature.
Yeah. So for me, I think we are in a transitional phase, right? The question ultimately breaks down to kind of what's the target state architecture, right? Obviously, the things that they're doing, in the interim, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge to scale, right? I mean, one of the big issues is kind of scalability of trust, right? And that becomes a kind of a really important issue. So to me, the question is whether they can legitimately build infrastructure, hold on to the mantle of the kind of one-stop shop for NFTs, and I think that, knowing the team there, knowing kind of all of the kind of amazing plans they have, like, I think they'll definitely be able to hold on to it. I think ultimately the battle is over better systems, right? So whether they're centralized or decentralized, they all just have to be better, right? Because ultimately they compete for consent, and users have to consent. So I think that's where the game goes. And I think it's to me, like, that's kind of the network effect is a pretty interesting thing to study in this.
And just to press on that a little bit more, Miko, it sounds like you're hinting at other tools that an OpenSea, just as an example, can, should, and will deploy. Can you share with the audience? Because inquiring minds want to know, what are some of those things that are coming that help it differentiate from a
Yeah,
Web3?
yeah. So we're super excited about the rental NFT space. We're super excited about there's kind of like ideas of like buy now, pay later. There's ideas like Solve Protocol, which is sort of like the voucher system. We like Lit Protocol. Some of these are already our investments, which is sort of access control gated NFTs, right? So we see a ton of NFT middleware functionality that I think will probably end up, being integrated in some shape or form, through these mechanisms. And I think there's going to be a lot of changes in identity as well. So, we're going to see some pretty cool infrastructure coming to NFT. NFT is kind of desperately non-functional from a middleware and infrastructure perspective. So, I think we're going to see wonderful capabilities coming online.
Yeah, it seems that way so far. Mario, I'm going to let you respond for sure to the same question in that thread, and then I'll ask you another question right after on the tools subject. Mario.
Yeah, so I took notes of what Miko said, mentioned two things earlier, and I took those notes as well as a comment from the audience. But the note about incentive misalignment, I think the most important thing, I think the most exciting thing, and I know I talk about not moving towards a utopia, definitely getting incrementally better, and I think it will get a lot better over time. But the most important thing that will allow it to get better, and Charlie Munger has a great quote on this, is that incentives are getting aligned. I think fundamentally, aligning incentives should lead to a better world, because it allows us to function in the right direction. So I think that's the most exciting aspect. And if you look at whatever development we'll see over the next few years, are the incentives aligned? If that's the case, then it should have should incrementally move to a better direction. If they're not, there's a fundamental flaw in the structure and the incentive alignment. Then you might have the same issues we had back in Web 2. But it's a space that I can't comment on because I'm just watching the space evolve, and I'm not in the right position to be able to talk about how that will go. There was a comment in the audience as well, but that was a really good comment. I'll probably comment on it earlier. Keep the comments going, everyone. Christian, you had a really good comment there. I'll respond to you later when we're talking about the topic. But Jordan, you had another question as well.
Yes, well, I do want to piggyback on what you said, which is about incentive alignment, right? You can see that in my hands. Just to explain, how were incentives misaligned, before?
It's a good question. I think the before, when they had community, not being part of a community, compared to Web3 right now, where you're incentivized to build that community in the right direction. So let's look at Dcentral. If you make a decision, so as part of the protocol, if you make a decision that's going to improve the ecosystem in any way, you're benefiting financially. However, being part of being part of Facebook, not owning a piece of the company and making a decision along with the board, the board is incentivized to increase the profits of the company, even if that doesn't benefit the users. And that's why OpenSea had the pushback with going public without launching a token, because not owning the token, being a public company, allows the shareholders to benefit rather than the users themselves. So it's the most obvious example of incentives not being aligned, where a token allows everyone to participate in the upside, whereas having shares that doesn't include the users would not allow for that.
Yeah, gamification or not, referring back to that question, sounds like tokens certainly will play a part in the space for a very long time. I do want to get that one question in that you pointed out, and then we'll be pretty much out of time. But it did come from Christian. It hints at dropping NFTs into games. He refers to that as a flash in the pan. But I'll go to you on the actual question, Miko, which is, do you think that this is the industry that'll bring NFTs to the masses? His question, to repeat it back to you, is: are we at that inflection point?
Yeah, so I don't want to be kind of misunderstood about the idea of a flash in the pan, which is that I think any individual game title is like lighter fluid, right? So if you ignite a game, it makes a big excitement, right? But it's brief, right? But it's not that the entire industry is a flash in the pan, right? So the entire game industry, I think, is probably going to be the most successful on-ramp to crypto DeFi blockchain, right? Because if you think about it, we're at the end of the year, we're going to be in a world with 8 billion other people, right? Probably 5 billion internet connected people, and probably 3 to 4 billion gamers, right? 54% of which are in Asia, right? So like, if you think about this kind of gamer, most of them mobile actually, right? But if you think about that, right, then you just think about that as an on-ramp, right? So really, it's just games are going to be fired out in rapid succession, right? So we're definitely going to see billions of people, right? So if you look at the price of Bitcoin, for example, from an alpha perspective, Dan Moorhead from Pantera is basically saying over 5 orders of magnitude the number of active wallets correlates to the price, right? And when we hit all the users the size of the internet, right, the price is going to be $700,000 Bitcoin, right? So I mean, if you look at that correlation, 5 orders of magnitude is pretty high correlation. So to me, I expect interesting times. So to me, I think what's going to cause the people to jump on here, we're going to make some announcements from our portfolio company, Giant Protocol. That'll be exciting. But I think also the gaming segment is going to be huge for onboarding.
Yeah, certainly will be. And so, just to repeat that back to you, so that we're all following along, Miko, the flash in the pan, that nuance is often just about one game, and that's a relic, right, from the past, 70s, 80s, 90s, even before that. Even with board games, they would spike in popularity. They draw an enormous audience in some cases, but eventually, at some point, there will be some decay in the attention to that particular game. But that's distinguished from the category. As you established, Miko. We've covered a bunch of different topics. There's been some awesome metaphors of big bubbles and small pirate ships. Speaking of all those metaphors, Mario, a lot of the metaphors relate to the artwork itself. And this, what we've seen a lot of questions on at Grit Daily and Black Telegraph that relate to what we see as a potentially great debate, especially of 2022. We have a pretty good idea of how it'll pan out, but narrowly on NFTs. Artwork or security, what's your take on where the market is headed? And that's a question from the audience too.
Yeah, so I wanted to comment first on the gentleman in the comments about the flash in the pan, but then he asked, so if you don't mind, I'll just address that comment, Jordan, before we move to the question. So will the industry bring NFTs to the masses? Absolutely. I think we're seeing that already. The numbers we saw with Axie are just mind-boggling. And the valuations kind of add on to that. So yes. I look, whenever we're looking for an opportunity, we look at utility. And when something's getting adoption, you shouldn't ignore it. And I remember when the concept of play to earn was coming up a few months ago, in the first few days, especially the first 2 days, I was very resistant. But then you look at the numbers, like, all right, cool, I'm the stupid one here. And we're seeing that already. So we're very bullish. We're very heavy on in-game assets. I think we've moved away significantly from assets that have, that either we don't understand. I'm talking about NFT assets. So digital assets that we either don't understand or we just can't comprehend the utility beyond, like, trying to replace a coupon where you get that NFT, you can get a 10-hour event. And I'm not saying it's bad. It's, part of the cycle, part of the evolution, really, really early. But in-game assets, at least for us, just make a lot more sense. However, betting on their value appreciation is not a sure bet. If an in-game asset is going to be used, doesn't mean it's going to increase in value, because the game could just create new ones. So you just got to be careful with making those bets. That's what, in some cases, the token makes more sense. But from an adoption perspective, absolutely very bullish and very excited. So that was the comment. Jordan, I'm still jet lagged, so sorry to digress, but you can go back to your question.
Yeah, it was about utility, and you actually started to answer it. One of the, just to repeat this back to you, in your stack, in your mind, a lot of the utility, at least some of the value, can be offered through in-game assets. And I think it's worth turning that into a more nuanced question, right? Since you did answer that, it is in the stack, right? We see a lot of these NFT projects come out. They're putting together roadmaps. We get emails about them all the time. A lot of them are half-baked. Some are fully baked. But one thing that they're trying to decide, and we know there's inquiring minds in the audience thinking the same things for their own projects. How should they evaluate what they should offer from a utility standpoint for the NFT franchise that they're trying to launch?
It's very difficult. I think as for me or for Miko?
It's for you, Mario. And
Yeah. So it's a very tough one. Miko said, it's all about experimenting right now. And, investing in the space is very risky because we're investing in experiments. I was in a meeting, so I went to Australia for 2 days, and one of the projects I met was Cetus Heroes. A great game, great team. And, we were literally sitting there brainstorming, me and a gamer, and I'm not a gamer, so I'm probably the dumb one on the table, but me, a gamer, and Dan, the founder, and trying to understand the different assets, what utilities they'll have. And everyone likes to talk about interoperability as well, which is the sexy term right now. We're struggling to figure out the game mechanics within the game and how different in-game assets will interoperate. So that alone is going to take years to figure out in the Web3 ecosystem. And then when you add the sexy concept of interoperability, it's going to get very, very technical, and the experiments are going to get very, very exciting as well. But figuring out what the utility, to go back to your question, what utilities to have for your NFT, and I'm focusing on in-game assets, and you've got to experiment. One thing that Cetus is doing well, and I respect them for that, is they're building in the open. So instead of perfecting their game and launching it in a year or 2 or 6 months, which could be the better choice, I don't know. But instead of doing that, they're launching a mediocre game right now. And they're saying, we're going to launch a shit game right now, but we want to build it openly, and we want the community to help us, crowdsource the game. I find that to be a very smart way to approach it from my perspective, because it allows the experiments to be quick and to have the feedback loop a lot shorter. Because, when you make a mistake and then you just compound on that mistake, and we'll all make mistakes, and then you launch the product with all those mistakes compounded, that makes it very difficult to resolve if possible at all. But then when you're building it along with your community, you'll spot those issues early, you'll be able to adapt quickly, and then build on a better foundation. I think it's a better way to approach the utility of your in-game assets, of your game or your metaverse. That would be the way I'd recommend to approach it.
Yeah, certainly. And so just repeat that back to you as well, so we all follow. It sounds like the tiling the floor metaphor, right? Which is always continue to get feedback, or start right in the middle, get feedback on that, and check in a marketing sense, marketing earlier, right? Getting feedback in from your audience, from your community, which we see in these comments a lot. Community is really important. Even a small community can give you some sufficient feedback to tile that floor a little bit better.
Experiment, as you say, experiment very, very rapidly and constantly.
Yeah, definitely. And your take on the utility question, Miko?
Yeah, so I think first off, there is no intrinsic value anywhere, right? So ultimately, all value is symbolic. And it turns out that we have this consensus matrix that's digital, right? So the existence of the consensus matrix that is machine adjudicated consensus, right, aka blockchain, right, turns out to be the foundational ground for a consensus reality, right? So it means that that's why we're doing this, right, is we're moving there because it turns out that physical reality doesn't produce consensus, right? And the reason why of incentives, right, which is if I make lies that make you angry on Twitter, I get amplification and I get followers and I get all this crap, right? So like, to me, that's so deeply broken. And what the internet's turning to as an experiment is blockchain, right? Because ultimately that's producing this consensus, right? But I think to tip the hat to what Mario was saying about interop, right? I'm seeing kind of people talking about in the chat, they're talking about wearables, right? Now, the thing that's crazy about the idea that there is the metaverse, right, is let's say I got these shades, right? I got these kind of metaverse shades, right? I put them on my avatar, right? Well, now every single freaking game in the world has to support them. Otherwise, how can I wear them in the metaverse, right? There isn't the metaverse, right? So I totally agree. But I also think that in a way, this interop problem is kind of an insanely hard problem, right? Because objects in the physical world have properties, right? So my question is, let's say I buy a sword, right? The sword's like a +1 sword. What does that even mean, right? If I bring it into a new game, what are the attributes of that sword in that game, right? And how is it that if I can bring it into a game that this sword doesn't break that game, it doesn't break the economy of that game, right? It's impossible, right? So to me, like, I think interop, there's levels and layers of interop that I think are, if it's only cosmetic, then I think we can get interop. But I think if it's utility, if it's a utility interop across games, it's going to be banana. Like you can't do it, right? You can't, like, let's say there's a sword that insta kills people when you swing it, right? So then bring that to any game and the game's broken, right? So to me, like, functional utility interop isn't a thing. It won't happen. So like, I think cosmetic interop, the ability to wear shades, we do have common 3D modeling standards. So that will happen, right? But like, it's cosmetic only. So
Yeah, clear example, no pun intended there, Miko. That's all the time that we have, but definitely fine point to put on that. Interoperability being one utility. That's certainly a key piece. Maybe that is a categorical piece, right? For blockchains more broadly, for metaverses more broadly, to look at, even inspect even more, because it's so important to be able to port certain elements, design elements, and utilities, as you established, Mario, over to their particular metaverse. That's the time that we have on this one. Hell of a conversation. Mario Nawfal from NFT Technologies, Miko Matsumura, Gumi Crypto's Capital, Jordan French here at Crypt Daily. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your NFTCon and these gentlemen from Dcentral.
thanks, guys.